Hello and welcome to the home of the Ghost Owl, and continuing with our Warhammer The Old World rulebook, we're now on the final part of the movement phase, this most complex of phases. So as we come to the end of the phase, we've looked at basic movement, we've looked at maneuvers, and we've looked more recently at charging, how we do charging and all the potentially different situations that could occur. And now we're up to fleeing. So, fleeing, direction of flight. Units fleeing directly away from an enemy unit will pivot about the centre until it is facing directly away from the centre of the enemy unit that it is fleeing from. Units that fail to rally during the strategy phase continue to flee during the compulsory moves subphase, and will continue to move along their previous path, moving straight ahead in the direction it is facing. Now the flee move itself, now you roll 2d6 and the result equals the distance moved in inches. The fleeing unit moves straight ahead in the direction it is facing, and it must move the full distance rolled, even if this takes the unit off the edge of the battlefield. It may change direction by pivoting only, and that's only if required to move around impassable terrain. Should any part of a fleeing unit come into contact or cross the edge of the battlefield, the entire unit is immediately removed from play and counts as having destroyed. So fleeing, being close to the table edge, is a very, very bad thing. Fleeing units move through friendly units with no penalty, and it's actually one of the only cases where a friendly unit can move through another friendly unit. If the fleeing unit would finish its move on top of the friendly unit, i.e. it doesn't have enough movement to completely go through, the actual fleeing unit will continue to move through that friendly unit until it's fully clear. So they would be 1 inch away from each other and fully clear. Now you've also got the flee move. So if a fleeing unit moves through an enemy unit, it immediately takes a perils test. So there could be a situation where you're kind of trapped, you're fleeing from the unit with the highest unit strength, and you've fled into an enemy unit, and now you're going to take a perils test for each model in the unit. To do that, you roll a d6 for every single model in the unit. If you're lucky enough and you roll a 4+, the model escapes. However, if you roll a 1, 2 or 3, the model is hit by the enemy and loses a single wound. If the fleeing unit would end up on top of the enemy unit, it continues until it is clear by 1 inch. Fleeing units move through difficult and dangerous terrain without any negative modifiers. However, dangerous terrain tests must still be taken. If fleeing from multiple enemy units, it will move directly away from the unit with the highest unit strength. A unit can only flee once per phase, and if it is forced to flee for a second time during the same phase, it will not pivot and it will flee 0 inches. Now, then you have give ground. So if you are giving ground, units move 2 inches directly away from the enemy unit that caused it without turning, pivoting, or changing its facing in any way. So essentially, the unit is stepping back 2 inches. It stops immediately if it comes into contact with another unit or terrain. Now, next up of movement is fall back in good order. Otherwise, you'll often see it written in this shortened form of Fabigo, however you want to pronounce that, but often you'll see people writing this acronym, hence why I've included it here. So, a unit that falls back in good order moves exactly like a fleeing unit, except you roll 2d6 and you discard the lowest result. and you automatically rally at the end of the move. Okay, so you've got giving ground, and then you've got the falling back in good order. So falling back in good order, essentially you're fleeing but not as far, and then you automatically rally at the end of the move. So that is a good thing. Next up, you've got moving off the battlefield. So only fleeing and pursuing models are permitted to move off the edge of the battlefield. You can't elect just to move off the edge of the battlefield, okay? Because if you do, your unit's immediately destroyed. Now, reinforcements. There are many reasons why you might have reinforcements and reinforcement rules, but how do you move them? So reinforcements enter the battlefield during the compulsory moves subphase. It is placed fully on the battlefield in contact with the table edge, and the table edge is determined by the rule that triggered the reinforcement. So whether it's your own edge, the short edges, the long edges, that's determined by the rule. Now, a unit that enters as a reinforcement cannot march, and it does count as having moved for the purposes of shooting. So even if it comes on and doesn't move, it's still counted as moving for shooting. A unit that enters as a reinforcement, however, can then move as normal during the remaining moves subphase. Now, terrain and movement. So, different types of terrain, and you've got open ground and hills. Now, of course, open ground and hills, the terrain does not impede movement. Next up is difficult terrain. Now, this terrain gives you a -1 modifier to your movement. If 25% or more of the unit is in difficult terrain or straddling a low linear obstacle at the end of its movement, it becomes disrupted. Low linear obstacles essentially are less than 2 inches high and are treated as difficult terrain. So think hedges, walls, fences, and the like. Next up is terrain and movement. Dangerous terrain. You get a -1 modifier to movement. If 25% or more of the unit is in dangerous terrain at the end of its move, it becomes disrupted. Each model must take a dangerous terrain test, and essentially that is roll a d6 for each model in the unit, and every roll of 1 causes a single wound to the model. Impassable terrain obviously cannot be crossed during the battle, and units must go around. Then you have high linear obstacles greater than 2 inches high are classed as impassable terrain, so things like castle walls and that sort of thing. You also have woods. Often we'll see a wood on the tabletop. Now, woods are treated as difficult or dangerous terrain, and the players need to agree before the start of the battle whether a wood is difficult or dangerous terrain. Finally, there's battlefield decoration. These are all the things you do to give your tabletop some type of atmosphere, maybe even some narrative to it. Now, these are small decorative elements of terrain. They're less than 2 inches across, and they have no impact on movement. And there you go, ladies and gentlemen, that is the end of all of the movement phase rules we've looked at in detail. So you now know how to move your units and turn them and face different directions to change formation. We've looked at how we charge, all the situations with that, and now we've even looked at all of those other rules that you'll come into with how you give ground, how you fall back in good order, and then what all the different terrain does in the game. So again, I hope this part of the series has been useful. We've done the strategy phase. We've now completed the movement phase. Of course, next up will be the shooting phase. So, but as I say, for me, I will keep saying it because I think for me it's the most important for people that are new into rank and flank games. Get your head around the movement phase. first and foremost, it's the most important. Reread those rules, practice it, play out scenarios. If you've got a few units, you've bought the starter box, even look at how situations might develop in the rules. Because for me, the game is won or lost in the movement phase most of the time, with the exception of dice RNG gods, which sometimes do strike when least expected. However, movement phase for me is the key to winning a game like Warhammer The Old World. I hope you found this series useful. If you have, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't, give it a thumbs down. Let me know why in the comments down below, because we're next moving on to the shooting phase and then the combat phase and other rules as well still to come as we start to look at things like unique special rules and the rest of the rulebook. And I want to make sure this is useful, informative and quality content before we start moving into the faction focuses. If you want to see more of that content, though, please hit that subscribe button. It's absolutely free for you to do, and it's a massive deal for me, so thank you for that in advance. And also, going forward, I am in the middle of a move. I know I've said this in a few videos, so if you've been watching those, you'll know that I am actually not only moving house, but moving country. As of essentially this video, I will no longer have access to my PC for over a month while it is in a container going across the ocean. I will still have my laptop, so I will still be creating Warhammer The Old World content videos, though please be aware the sound quality will be a little bit lower, but I'll be doing my best to mitigate that. But there'll be no more video game content until the beginning of March, and no more live streams as well until the beginning of March. But I will be still putting out Warhammer The Old World content every day, or almost every day. There might be the odd day where I physically don't have the opportunity to do it. As you can imagine, it's an incredibly busy time. I'm trying to pre-record and do as much as I can in advance. But it isn't always possible. So thank you for bearing with me. And once we get to March, we'll be back up and running full speed, back with the PC, back with the better sound quality, better microphone, and everything that goes with it. So thank you for bearing with me. Thank you all for your support. It's been great so far. I'm looking forward to really digging into more of the old world throughout 2024. This is the year of the resurrection of, for me, of what was Warhammer Fantasy Battle in a slightly different format with slightly different lore and even slightly different armies in some cases. But still, for me, it is coming back to a Warhammer IP rank and flank game. You've been watching The Ghost Owl, and I'll see you all very soon.